Any other quizzes time to get? Okay, these will be up in my office. Should you want to pick your quiz up after I enter it into Sakai, you're welcome to do so, but definitely no obligation. I do not intend to just pass them back at any point since you've already seen the results. Let's share my screen for the video recording. And so today we're going to continue talking about Docker. And we're going to, today's going to be our last day talking about Docker. We're going to finish everything that we need today. Basically all of the sort of setup configuration things that we've been doing. And we're going to, starting Friday, talk about using all of this stuff inside of Postgres, this database that we're going to be working with, and getting started with these SQL commands, actually running data and storing it within our machines. Again, the lab is posted already, and today we're going to be going through the last of the material that you need for this lab. The basic idea of this lab is similar to the last lab. There's just a bunch of, you don't have to write any novel new code or come up with new commands. It's all provided for you up here. But there's going to be a lot of just weird things that happen, and so you need to make sure that you have a sane environment. This will make sure that we have a sane environment so that we can get, when we are creating our own new commands, we know that the problem is with us and not with our environment. So I mentioned the last assignment took me less than a half hour to complete. It was like probably a 5 or 10 minute assignment for me. This one here was about a 2-hour assignment for me. Last time I taught this course, people said that, I don't know, my guess is that like the average medium time to completion was between like 8 to 10 hours. So just for your planning purposes. If things go smoothly, it won't take that long, but good chance things won't go smoothly. Any questions before we get started? Yes.
There's no, I would say like last time it was not working because it was supposed to now, right?
Yeah. So last time there were some things that you had to. If you typed it in exactly, you would encounter some problems, and that would cause things to not work. This one, at least as of 1 year ago, which is the last time that I went through it in detail, had no problems like that. Maybe over the past year something has come up, but not to my knowledge. Good question. Okay, so I have 2 terminal windows opened up. We're going to go over, last time at the very end, we started, I said that we were going to start talking about volumes. We didn't quite get to it. And so we'll repeat where we left off and then get into this, this idea of a Docker volume. And so here we go. So I'm in this Flask web folder, which is the folder that we were working with last time. Again, it's available on GitHub. And this is the same, the contents of this folder is the same as for last week's lab. Run ls, let's go ahead and delete these test and volume 2 folders, which we will be recreating here in a second. But this contents is the same, and then we created this, I updated the requirements.txt to make things work, and then I also added this docker compose.yaml file. Down on the bottom, I'm gonna open up the docker compose.yaml, and at this point, very simple YAML file, but the purpose of this YAML file was to make it so that we didn't have to remember these really long, awkward Docker commands, that I can just do Docker compose up, optionally with the -d to make it run as a daemon, and it brings up the web server for me, or in this case, it's a web server, but brings up all my Docker containers and automatically does port forwarding or whatever else I need it to do. And over in Firefox, if I come over here, refresh this page, this is what the output of that looked like. We're gonna add a new field into this Docker compose now, which handles the volumes. The volumes, so I'll type out what the syntax looks like, volumes, and then the dash, and then it's one of these colon separated fields like this. And anytime we have a colon separated field, you always need to remember that the thing close to you, to the left is what's close to you. The thing to the right is what's far away from you. So with port forwarding, in this case, 3400 is on the Lambda server. The Lambda server is closer to you than the Docker container because the Docker container is inside the Lambda server, and 5000 far away from you inside the Docker container. What the purpose of the volume is going to be to map. So volumes will map a location on the Lambda server to the Docker container. So it'll look something like Lambda server path colon Docker container path. Save that. Again, the hashtags and YAML files, just like Python or the shell, are comments, and so these will have no impact on our YAML file. You can always have anytime you have one of these fields, you can always have it be empty, and that'll be okay. So volumes colon, that should hopefully not break anything. Let's, should be an array. Okay, I guess I was wrong. Volumes does have to, if it exists, it has to have something. Okay. Last time too, at the very end, I was giving us a little motivation for volumes, and I want to do that again real quick, just to remind us what we were doing. So I'm starting the container up here on the top, and I'm going to enter the container Docker compose with the exec command. When you use Docker compose exec, the thing over here is the name of the service that we're going inside of. At this point, we only have one service, the web service, so it's Docker compose exec web, and then the name of the terminal or the name of the command that I want to use. In this case, I'll be using bash. And here we have this app.py, and what I want to do is edit this app.py. So vim app.py, and because we didn't install vim in this Docker container, the vim command is not found. So I have the bright idea of, instead of editing it in the Docker container, let's edit it down here in the actual Lambda server. So vim app.py like this. Come inside of here. Cool vim command is that I have my cursor inside these quotation marks. I want to delete everything inside of those quotation marks and enter insert mode. And so I type CI quotation mark, 3 characters, does all that for me. Don't have to bother about selecting something with my mouse or manually deleting things, just CI, and then the thing that I want to be delete inside of it, it deletes all that. Escape, U, undo. To show this again, CI, parenthesis, deletes everything inside the parentheses. Escape, undo. If I want to delete a whole paragraph, CI, curly brace, CI. Oh, I guess the paragraph's not working. Got ahead of myself. But anyway, CI, quotation mark, delete everything inside of there. And let's change this to changed app.py. Escape, colon, W, save that. And our hope is that this might actually change the app.py. Come over here, refresh the web server, and we see that the results do not change. The reason the results do not change is because the information on the Lambda server is 100% totally separated from the information on the Docker container. And we can illustrate that with the cat command, cat app.py, and we can see that here this line still has its old value because they're totally separate from each other. If I wanted to actually update this, I'd have to leave this Docker compose down, rebuild the container, Docker compose build, and then rerun it, docker compose up-d, like that. Come back over here, refresh. Oh, do I have a problem in my container? Docker compose logs shows the output of the of running it. Just not running it. Oh dear, what have I done? Docker compose up. Exited with code 0. Well, not sure what I did to break Docker right now. So we're not going to be looking at it over here. The demonstration won't be quite as spectacular, but I don't want to spend any more time trying to fix that right now because it's probably not important. And instead, what we're going to do is, I do have to fix it. It's going to need to be running, and it is not running. Okay, so let's fix it. Docker compose build. What's your problem, Docker? Let's run it, and okay, successfully built. Docker compose up, and it's not giving me any actual error messages down here. It's just telling me, I think I'm Vim Docker file. The problem is that last time at the end of class, I commented out the part where it said to actually run the command. So :wq Docker compose build. Docker compose up -d. Over here now, refresh. Oh dear. Okay, still not running. Docker compose logs. No module. Oh, it's this thing again. Okay. One other change that I made at the end of class, I guess, is I was using the old requirements.txt instead of the proper one. Okay, one last try before we give up. Build up -d. And let's just check, are you running? Yes, you are running right here. So it gives me good confidence. F5. Okay, change that.py. Huge pain in the ass to do all that. Even if everything worked correctly, there was a set of 3 commands that I had to run to make everything work. But as you see, things do not always work correctly. And then I know I am relatively proficient at debugging these problems with Docker at this point, and it still took me 3 or 4 minutes, way too much time to waste to make some stupid change to our app. And so volumes is going to help us link the folders on the Lambda server to the folders in the Docker container so that we don't have to go through any of that crap when we are editing our code and seeing the changes instantly. Yes? Oh yeah, so the question is, doesn't that defeat the purpose of containers entirely if you can link them together? And the answer is a little bit, yes. So you have to use these volumes judiciously in order to link things together in the right way that doesn't end up actually defeating the purpose. So opening up the Docker compose file down here, editing, I guess I already had it open, :q. I know that it was already open because it's seeing the ls-a, it's seeing the docker compose.yaml.swap file that we talked about earlier, giving up that messages. I pressed Control-Z before to send Vim to the background. Now I'm going to type FG to sing it back to the foreground. And now we're going to actually fill out this volumes field correctly to link the to a location on the Lambda server to the Docker container. Again, the format for this is the thing closest to you, the Lambda server, : the thing farthest away from you, the Docker container path. On the Lambda server, I want to link the dot folder, the folder that I am currently located at. The dot folder will correspond to the folder that contains the docker compose.yaml file. I could specify the full path to this folder if I type pwd. I could copy and paste this entire thing right here. But that's a lot of work. And if I move this to a different location, upload it to GitHub, you download it, then you would have to change that. So I'm just going to do dots, and then a colon, and then a location on the Lambda server. All of these things inside of YAML, it's super annoying. You need to have a dash in front of them. So it's dash, and then this format right here, just like this. So dash dot colon, and then the location on the Docker container. Up here, let's rerun the bash command that I had run before. One frustrating thing about Docker Compose is that if you're editing the Docker Compose file, you can't use Docker Compose while you're in the middle of editing it. So in order to actually use it, I have to change it back to what it was before, like this. Now I can rerun this. Now I'm back in the Docker container. Now I can change this back like this. U inside of Vim undoes. And now I'm inside of this container right here. Type pwd, you see that I'm in the app folder, type ls. You can see that here's all the files that got copied from the Lambda server into the Docker container. Over here, down here, colon tab E, I'm opening up a new window inside of Vim, Docker file like this. There's this copy command on line 9, right here, this line right here. And there's another copy command on line 15. This copy command down here says copy everything in my current project, my current folder, to the /app. That's where it's going to be located on the Docker container. This is the copy command that I don't want to have happen just when I run Docker build. By default, if it's in the Docker file, it only happens when you run Docker build. I want it to happen every time. As soon as I make a change here, it'll make a change here. As soon as I make a change here, it'll make a change here. In order to do that, that's what the volume is for. Volume makes the changes instant. Docker file makes it only at build time. So dot and then /app. These two things, I selected dot and /app because in the Docker file it has copy, dot, and /app. Save that over here, leaving the Docker container. Docker, in order to make the volumes take effect, I'm going to bring the container down, Docker Compose down, Docker Compose up, -D. Notice that I am not rebuilding the Docker container. If you make a change to the Docker Compose, you do not have to rebuild it. You only have to rebuild it when you make a change to Docker file. And now rerunning the Docker exec web bash down here inside of app. There's our app. Over here, I'm in the Lambda server. I'm going to open up a new window, app.py. I'm going to come down here, change this to hello world. Maybe we'll add a did it work. And save that. Notice that I did not anywhere do anything inside of the Docker container up here. Up here, refresh. Hello world, did it work? Yes. So now I don't have to go through all of the Docker hassle anytime I want to change one of these files. I can directly just edit things on the Lambda server and they're connected together. Did a lot of things right there. So let's pause and take a breath for questions.
Does this mean like there's no use of installing dependencies like stuff on Docker? You never really work directly on Docker?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the question is there ever a point in installing Vim on the Docker container? And in particular, because in this case, we saw a recent situation where we were able to get around editing things inside of Docker, not using Vim. The vast majority of Docker containers do not have Vim installed. We will see some situations where you can't do things like this. You actually have to do it inside of the Docker container. And so you would need Vim installed for that. We will also, I guess there's two causes for that. One is when you're doing something inside of the database, there are certain situations where the database will open up Vim for you, and that only works if the container with the database has Vim. The other is that there are many times when you actually can't access the physical hardware that Docker is running on. So for example, if you're deploying your system on AWS or Azure, you basically just give them the Docker containers and they will magically shuffle them around to the physical hardware as they see fit, and you never have access to the physical hardware. For this class, you can basically always just get something connected like this though. Yes? Yes, so this app folder is the root in the root directory so it's /app. This is an absolute path on the Docker container. And this is a common, just a common location in a Docker container to install all of your like application specific files. And then the normal like Unix hierarchy is still sitting down there in all the other places. Any programs that are not like specific to your application, like Python should be installed in here. That's in its normal installation location, and your specific files go in the /app. So the question is about like, why is this in /app instead of like in a home folder? And part of the lab is going to walk you through, actually, you'll do both of those two things, and it'll talk a little bit about the security implications of each of them. Yeah, both of those things are good in different situations, slightly different security trade-offs. Great questions. Any other questions so far? Okay, so this is one use of the of Docker volumes, is to be able to edit code and get real quick feedback on whether the code is working or not working. The second use of Docker volumes, which is actually why Docker volumes were originally created, and the more important use of Docker volumes, is to have persistent state between our different runs of the database. And so up top, I'm gonna quit out of the container, and we'll do ls my home folder, and we have this big data folder. Big data, again, is sitting on a much larger RAID array of spinning Rust hard drives, and so you have 250 gigabytes of access to the big data folder. But those hard drives are a lot slower, and so we only want to store certain data there and not all of the data. And in particular, you'll want all of your like text files, your Docker containers, all of those things to be sitting like in a project folder on the fast NVMe hard drives, and then the actual like data to be sitting on the big data folder. The way you do that is with a volume. We map do /big data to, again, the thing on the left-hand side is the thing that is closest to you. And so let's go ahead and do big data. This project's name is called FlaskWeb, so we'll call it FlaskWeb. So this folder right here inside of the big data, and sorry, that shouldn't be a dot, that should be a /home/user test, my user account name. Who am I? I am user test. So this goes to the FlaskWeb folder in my big data folder in my home folder. Again, that's to the left of the colon because it is on the Lambda server closer to me. I want to map this onto the Docker container into /big data. And now I'll have a folder called big data inside of the Docker container that I can use, Docker compose down, to store stuff in and have -d rerun our exec ls/big data, and there's nothing inside of it right now. Let's go ahead and create something inside there. touch/big data/example file like this. And now down here, Control-Z, ls tilde/big data/FlaskWeb contains this example file in it. And up here, if I leave out of the Docker container, do Docker compose down, this still exists inside of the Lambda server. The Docker container went away, but my data stays around. And then up here, I can rerun it and re-go into it, ls, sure, we'll do -l/big data, doing the, there we go, example file. And there it is. You'll notice that up here, again, I've mentioned this before, but up here inside of the container, this file is owned by root. Due to magic that's happening inside of the Linux kernel, down here, this file is still owned by user test inside of the Lambda server. So this is the main way that we're going to be using volumes in this class, is to have data that's persistent between different runs of the Docker containers. Any questions about that? Yes.
Does this allow the container to be able to change data like outside of the container?
Exactly. So this data right here, the right way to think about it is that this data is outside of the container, and we can manipulate it, do whatever we want with it, and it's not going to get reset. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that just seems like dangerous.
Yeah, so the question is, that seems dangerous. And for web application, that's something you would never want to have one of these volumes. Guaranteed, like, awful practice if you do that. And that goes back to one of these sorts of design principles that mentioned, like, sort of with this Instagram tech stack, these web applications not supposed to talk to each other. If you were to read that link on the 12-factor web apps, it would talk about how they should never talk to each other. But for databases, like, I mean, the purpose of a database is to store data, to make it available for you, and so you have to have some place to store it. And so the databases are really the only place where you want these sorts of volumes. Excellent.
I wanted to ask, when you sort of do the initialization of the volume that when you dash on that's big data last web, was there already a last web?
Great question. So this folder to the left and this folder to the right, they do not have to exist beforehand. Docker will automatically create them for you.
And will it create it, so is it seeing that like this is fast web and then like copying over the contents of fast?
It will not copy any contents. It'll just create an empty folder.
So there's an empty folder now, big data called fast web, and how is that connected to the Docker container in the other Flask web in week 2?
So yeah, right now we have only one Flask web running, and there's only one container that, yeah, one of these volumes that it has access to. It is possible I could bring up another container, attach it to this volume, and then multiple containers could have access to the same resource. Super dangerous thing to do, very bad idea.
I mean, if you do right now, so this container is running in the big data folder, it's running off of the big data folder and not off of the last.
Slash data right here, slash data inside the container refers to this folder in the Lambda server.
Okay, so you don't have access to the app and everything from this.
Because I have this, so I have two volumes. This one up here gives me access to the app folder.
Oh.
This one down here gives me access to the.
I forgot that the app.
Yep, that works. Yeah, so you can have as many volumes as you want on a container connecting to various locations. And yeah, good questions. Yes.
I just have this question. The thing is, like, only the right there, and then there's user test, and user test have big data,
yep,
and big data have fast data.
Exactly.
But the other line is big data only. Is it like all of them? Is it that they are all on the Lambda server, and then you just like doing one passport, or how is it that?
Yeah, so it's from within the Docker container. It's slash big data because it's on the right of the colon. So this is inside the Docker container, and this is on the Lambda server. How it does that is super complicated operating systems theory that we're not going to get into. For our purposes, we just need to know that this is slash big data right here, and assuming there's no bugs in the Linux kernel, you can't access anything else besides just this particular location.
So right here in my question, like, can we check that big data name to something else? It's like, oh, they have to be the same as the big data.
We could edit this this Docker compose file to contain links to whatever folders we want, but we can only do that from within the Docker compose and not from within the Lambda, not from within the container. Once you're inside the container, you can't change where this /big data points to.
No, my question was this actually, it looks like the name is kind of like creating that data here. Is there any way we can change the name in the container when they're creating the file?
Oh yeah, so the fact that I called this one big data over here has no relation to this over here. I could call it like whatever, gibberish like that. Save it up here, exit out, bring it down, bring it up, re-exec bash, ls/, now we have this crazy folder right here, /la that still has that same file in it that we created before. Yes?
Like, if you're using like AWS or something, does that if your Docker, does it restrict you from doing stuff like this? You said you can't, it's actually from their server.
Yeah, this is a great question. And this segues us into our next topic. So here, this format for volumes is something called a bind mount. Docker strongly recommends that you never use bind mounts. For our class, we're going to need to use them at certain points because we have multiple hard drives. We need to store data in different locations. But Docker recommends you use something called a named volume. And a named volume, the thing to the left of the colon, is the name of a volume. Just call it volume_name. And the thing to the right of the colon is the location that you want it to be at, like that. Since both of these two things have let's go ahead and make it a little bit back to semantically meaningful. One of the most powerful keys in Vim, thing that you should definitely get your fingers used to using, is the dot key. The dot key repeats the previous command that you just did. This line right here, I want to replace it with the word big data. C stands for delete and go into insert mode. E stands for take from your current cursor's position to the end of the current word. And then type big data. Escape, down, B, beginning of the word. And then dot repeats my last insert mode command, replacing that with big data for me. And want to comment out the bind mount, so we only have the named volume. A named volume is something that Docker is going to pick the location where it's going to be stored. On the Lambda server, that corresponds to the /local/share/Docker folder. This is where all of your named volumes will be stored in this volumes folder right here. On AWS or a web server, the advantage of using a named volume is that AWS will manage it for you, and sometimes it'll be put on the same machine that the thing is running. Depending on your particular storage needs and speed access needs, they might put it on a separate machine that has higher capacity. But using a named volume instead of a bind mount lets Docker be more flexible about things like that. Bind mounts, AWS, Azure, all of those services, they won't even let you use bind mounts. You can only use named volumes. The way we know this is a named volume is because it does not start with either a dot or a slash. Bind mounts always start with the dot slash to indicate a relative path from this location, reference the app folder. So like the dot is this folder right here. And so that's a relative path starting with a dot, absolute path starting with a slash, this exact location on your hard drive. A named mount does not start with a dot or a slash, and that means it's a named mount. Sorry, a named volume. In order to use a named volume, we also have to, down here, type volumes, colon, and then the name of your volume, volume_name, colon. And there's various settings that you can have down here about like specifying things to AWS, like I need a volume that has 10 gigabytes and access speeds of 1 gigabyte per second or whatever you need, and it will allocate that for you. But yeah, so named volume, the main thing to be able to recognize named volume doesn't start with dot or slash. And the bind mount starts with dot or slash. I'm going to go ahead and rerun this real quick. Docker compose down. Docker compose up dash D. That'll bring it up. And if I type Docker volumes ls, it'll list Flask Web right here. That's the name of the project I'm working on. And then the volume name over here, the name of the mount, the name of the named volume that I just created. Let's see. There's two last real quick concepts that I want to get to make sure that you seen everything you need before the lab. So if you have questions on this, that's okay. I can answer them after class, but I want to just push on real quick. First of those concepts is called an environment variable. I got to make sure things lined up. Here we go. The order of things in YAML files doesn't matter, so I'll just put it at the top, although that's a little bit awkward. And in environment, you just specify variables that you want equal to something. And it's common to do things like, well, I'll just start with an example, equals hello, like this. And now so up here, Docker compose down, Docker compose up dash D, Docker compose exec web bash. And now I have access to this variable, example variable inside the shell up here. I can do echo $ example, and it will give me hello. It's common to put all of your configuration settings inside of these variables. So things like passwords or any IP addresses that you might need to connect to, or login credentials, any of that stuff inside of these variables, so that it's not hard-coded into your code files, like your Python files, not hard-coded into a Docker file, but just sitting out here separate from all that, and then you access it through these, something like this. Last real quick concept that we need to come over related to that, cd proj. Flask on Docker is the name of the project. These are all the files that you have to create. And I'm going to do ls-a real quick. There's this environment.prod.db file. And this is what contains the actual like passwords for your Postgres database. All of your files are going to get uploaded to GitHub, except for this file right here. This file can never be uploaded to GitHub. And a lot of security vulnerabilities, probably, I don't want to say the majority, but the majority of severe break-ins that have happened to companies is because some programmer accidentally uploaded the passwords to their bank, to GitHub, and hackers just said, hey, I can log in now and withdraw all the money. Password files never upload to GitHub. Say a little bit more about that next time, but that's it for today. If you have any questions about anything, I will stick around for as long as there's questions, or see you in office hours later today. Ooh, sorry, one last super quick announcement too. I'm giving a colloquium talk today about totally separate stuff from this class, machine learning with cool pictures about dogs and things. So there's a GitHub issue about that if you'd like to join. But certainly no pressure if you don't. See you all on Friday. Yes.
Cool question in regards to the possible situation. I'm using the Docker thing in my week task. I can put my pin, the GitHub pin
Right.
I put that on the environment.
Yes.
Something like password just to echo on the side.
That is the right way to do it. Friday I'll actually go through the right way in more detail. But yes, that's the right thing to do.
I'm having trouble with installing the
What are you trying to do?
I'm just following the directions and I want to the most recent one.
I think go back. I think this is supposed to be inside of a Docker container.
I think that was the start of the direction. Oh, this dependency. It just says.
Oh, so it's I see. It's just Python 3 on the Linux server.
I guess so.
You know, 3.9.
So we should just use this version of Python.
Yeah. There's nothing special about 3.9.
Okay. Thank you. Is this Colombian talk or the Harvard Colombian?
It's for the math. It's joint between all things, but it's math, not CS.
It's $80. Oh, yeah. This one.
Does it conflict with the CS time? I don't know.
It comes on Thursday. Yeah. I might have some questions regarding running Docker. It says permission denied. And I tried to rerun everything.
So here, when it's doing Docker Compose build, it's running this Docker Compose in the /user/bin/Docker Compose. What we need to do is install Docker Compose locally for your user account. And so that means pip install Docker Compose.
I think it's pip is pip3 or
Yeah, pip3.
so Docker Compose.
Yeah. Good try. Okay, so then your path is not set up right now so that the programs installed through pip are things that you can run. If you do the echo $path, okay, it should be inside of this. Can you do ls of your .local/bin folder?
ls./home folder.
Yeah, it needs to be your home folder .local/bin. The home .local bin. And Docker Compose is there, but it's not defining it for some reason. If you, mind if I touch your computer for a second? Up arrow / wherever it says Docker Compose, you can specify this, and that'll run the Docker Compose. So you can do Docker Compose build that. I'm not sure why somehow we have to fiddle around with the path variable to make it find that. I'm not sure why it's not finding that right now.
Well, if you echo Docker, the echo Docker ports, it's showing nothing there.
Go ahead and show me what you're meaning. I'm not sure what you mean.
Docker port.
But I think it's Docker_host is maybe what you're thinking of.
Host or
so this is a variable that needs to be set. Docker port's not a thing.
oh, so I need to copy paste everything here into.
So this variable is just used internally by Docker various commands. It's not related to what we were seeing before with Docker Compose not being able to be found.
Okay. Why is the permission denied?
But yeah, so it's not it's looking at the wrong Docker compose command. Problem's the path variable. It's gonna take me a minute to figure out exactly what's wrong with that path variable. In the meantime, you can use the full path to the Docker compose command like this. That will work.
So now it will work, or
If you use the full path, it will work. I'm going to help other people. I can come back to shorten that for you in a second.
So, in text, I think that was great to go on. I did was instead of like, if something happened wrong, and then you take one point out of the data too, also like taking 1 point out of the phone that
That is incorrect.
That's incorrect.
No, so like you're saying that Daniel, right? So you got these 4 right, these 2 wrong. So yeah, it should be 8 minus 1 minus 1 is 6.
Okay. Oh, so okay. Then I guess that's okay.
Yeah.
Hi. So last night, as I was like
Can you
reviewing,
your name?
I'm Gary.
Gary.
I
Okay.
just
Oh, you
started the
just joined.
class,
Yep.
yeah. So I was like trying to
That's
try
right.
some of the quick stuff, specifically the remove like star thing, and I just like tried running it here and it deleted my big data file. And I wasn't really sure how to bring it back. I know that was probably permanent. So
So I can add it back real quick. So, yeah.